What's up, everyone? It's the Autistic Scyther here, and this is part 2 of Top 10 Archers in Video Games. Now, for those that are possibly wondering where part 1 is, it's already up on my channel. So, if you want to watch numbers 10 through in that video to see what numbers 10 through 6 are, I suggest you watch that video first, then come back to this video for the remaining 5 entries. That being said, let's get back into it. Moving on next at number 5, we have Decidueye from Pokemon Sun and Moon. Alright, we have a Generation 6 Pokemon for sword wielders in video games, and a Gen 8 Pokemon for lance wielders, so kinda makes sense that we'd have to have a Gen 7 Pokemon. And starting it off, I know I'm not the only one that basically was more or less as excited to see a Pokemon like Rowlet. And there's a reason this round little goofball became a popular Pokemon in Gen 7. And the anime definitely did it some favors by adding to its goofiness. However, surprisingly enough, it's fair to say that many of us, myself included, were not expecting this thing to evolve into a Pokemon like Decidueye. And honestly, definitely fits all the accolades, as not only does it trade its grass and flying type for grass and ghost, fitting for a shadowy archer, it basically has the amount to basically hide within its surroundings, grab an arrow quill from its cloak, knock it in its wing, and fire it to pierce a pebble from more than a few miles away. And additionally, even with that, it can even attack an opponent without them realizing what even just happened. And even with that, Decidueye becomes a pretty fierce fighter with moves like Leaf Blade, Energy Ball, Feather Dance, Brave Bird, Hex, and even its signature move, Spirit Shackle, which whenever it hits an opponent, it has the ability to pin them down and prevent them from escaping the battle. Yeah, you would think that they wouldn't be able to improve upon it at any point in the near future, right? Well, Legends Arceus proved everyone wrong, as eventually it was introduced to have a Hisuian form in Hisuian Decidueye, which would trade up its typing of Grass Ghost to Grass Fighting, and give it a brand new signature ability in Triple Arrows, which basically allows it to kick its opponent before firing 3 arrows at it, with not only dealing damage to it, but giving it a chance to possibly deal a critical hit as a result. Honestly, I can't wait for Gen 10 to see how they can improve on something as awesome as Decidueye. Here's hoping. Moving on next at number 4, we have Raven from Tales of Vesperia. And when it comes down to it, we first essentially meet Raven when he's in the dungeons with Yuri, and he basically clues him into the mysterious mage messing with the town's Blastia. And even with that, Raven ends up fighting. It still proves that Raven may be a little, flaky. Especially when we eventually get a proper party. And we end up, when you get a proper party in the game, and you end up meeting up with him when you're trying trying to infiltrate Rago's manor. Of course, he basically creates a diversion, allowing you to get in there. But of course, he more or less just causes a commotion that you still have to go after him as a result. And even after he shows up to help you out, there still looks like there's a few things he has hiding in a few skeletons he has hiding in his closet. And eventually, more often than not, you do discover that he has a connection with the knights. Which really does say a lot. Not spoiling it for anyone who hasn't played Tales of Vesperia fully. But even with that, you're possibly wondering about what makes Raven a solid archer. And naturally that has to do with his moveset, as many of his moves are fairly notable, as he has the ability to not only fire arrows from a distance, but he can split his bow into two blades and attack. And he has a lot of solid moves as well, including Windblade, which has him attack with a single blade of wind, Tempest, which allows him to summon 3 tornadoes, and Serpent, which basically allows him to shoot a glyph into the ground and basically causing it to explode whenever an opponent steps on it. And even his own signature move, Love Shot, which has the ability to heal him and allies. Yeah. So he's a pretty solid unit to have, especially if you want either close-up combat or ranged combat. Better than dealing with his manly musk. I swear, watch the skit, that is weird. Moving on next at number 3, we have Takumi from Fire Emblem Fates. Alright, archers in Fire Emblem have not had the best rep when it comes down to it, mainly because they've been able to attack from range and have no way to attack close up. And honestly, they've really had a lot. It's hard to choose a solid choice for this list. And for a while, I was considering Shinon from Radiant Dawn, since he basically helped, well, more or less, has revived people's faith in the archer class. However, I decided to go for Takumi, since he plays a role in Fates and its entire story. Especially since, due to being the second son and the third youngest member of the Hoshiden royal family, yeah, honestly, he's one of the few who has a bit of an interesting reaction when it comes to Korin. Because when Korin ended up in Hoshido after living in Nor for a while, he eventually showed his suspicions towards them due to being raised in Nor. And honestly, he makes it shown that they're not welcome there. Granted, that being said, things change depending on which pathway you choose. If you decide to stick around on Hoshido and help them out, then Takumi becomes your ally. Granted, while he is dealing with a lot of his insecurities, which puts him under a spell to end up almost betraying the group, he's able to overcome them and become a solid member of your party. That being said, if you join Nor, if you decide to take the conquest pathway and decide to stick with your family in Nor, he does a full downward spiral as the possession from falling down the bottomless canyon, basically takes him over to the point where he basically jumps off the Great Wall of Susanoo and ending up and returning at the end as a full-on revenant possessed by a Nonkos, becoming a pretty hard boss. Yeah, either way, he's not one you would want to make an enemy out of. And this is a guy with a bow that can shoot wind arrows. Yikes. Moving on next at number 2, we have Hanzo from Overwatch. Alright, I've never played Overwatch. In fact, when it was popular, I never had it on my radar. But honestly, besides McCree and May, Hanzo's interested me as an interesting sort of character. And he's a guy that basically was trained to become an assassin by his father, who basically he helped train him to take over the family business. As such, he was trained in swordsmanship, bowmanship, and martial arts. That being said, after his father died, and he was soon to take the head of the organization. Yeah. Basically, he was tasked with setting his brother Genji straight. Of course, as such, he refused to do so and basically walked away, washing his hands of his father's legacy and the family business. Of course, that still doesn't mean he'd sneak into his family's manor, in which he essentially ended up getting attacked by a mysterious assassin, being his brother Genji, who is now a cyber ninja. Yeah, which basically shook him something fierce after his interaction. Eventually, this led him into joining Overwatch, in order to set his brother straight and basically make amends with him. And not only that, he does so by showing his bow quite naturally, being able to fire an arrow that can allow him to pinpoint where his opponents are, firing 6 fast, fully powered arrows at the opponent, climbing walls, while jumping in midair to lunge at the opponent, and even firing an arrow that can summon 2 spirit dragons. 2 huge spirit dragons. Oh man, that's something. That's something. No wonder. Finally, moving on next at number 1, we have Revali from Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I was this close to putting Link on this list. However, honestly, I think there's obviously one better, and that one has to be Revali, who is not only one of the great champions of Hyrule in Breath of the Wild, but he's a Rito archer who is known for his skill with a bow, especially his signature bow, the Great Ego Bow. And of course, speaking of besides his Great Eagle Bow, he's also known for having a solid ego, seeing Link as a sort of rival, especially considering how Link became a knight and guardian to Zelda, as well as a lot of others. That being said, like most of the others, he also was willing to help face off against Calamity Ganon at the start, before the game even began. Of course, he ended up dying to Windblight Ganon, and it takes Link to essentially slay him for Revali to, beyond the grave, more or less respect his abilities, and giving him Rivali's Gale, which will be able to lift him up in a burst of wind, as well as giving him the same Great Eagle Bow. Although, yeah, he's still number 1 in that count. Yeah. Those are the top 10 video game archers. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.